people come from all walks of life. They all have lives they lead. Any and all are welcome here to come and chat with me.
Hi everyone, welcome to Small Talk. Well, today my guest is a retired physics professor from UFV, although that's not what he's going to be talking about. Let's find out more, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, Tim Cooper. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm glad I'm really glad you're here. So now you have something important that you would like to talk about, right?
Well, I've been actually talking about it for over 18 years now, so I guess I must think it's important.
Okay.
It's really just climate change and some of my concerns about what's happening and what's not happening. Some of the dirty tricks that are being pulled to prevent progress in getting rid of the problem of carbon dioxide buildup in the air. And really, that's it. I have been going around giving presentations in Chilliwack and throughout the valley, in fact, not to mention a bit of Ohio and Washington State too. Whenever I'm invited, I go. And now that I'm retired, I can even go further and faster, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I do. If anybody out there would like a climate change speaker to come in, or if you feel strongly against the science of climate change and you want someone to kick around a bit, invite me there too. I've done that. It's fun.
So what did you think about the summit that just had occurred?
Well, it's not entirely clear what they've actually agreed to me. They have agreed to stop subsidizing fossil fuels, but the Harper government, many years ago here in Canada, agreed, they signed an international agreement to stop subsidizing fossil fuels, and then they didn't. Right. So is this one really going to make a difference? I don't know. I hope so. There's always hope, but,
yes, but
history would suggest that it's not that good.
Yeah.
Here in Canada, we subsidize fossil fuels to the tune of $40 billion a year. That's according to the IMF. If you want to know exactly how much we subsidize fossil fuels, you'll find all sorts of numbers everywhere, because as you can imagine, the truth is a scarce quantity in this business because there are profits to be made. Mm-hmm. However, I tend to trust the International Monetary Fund more than any specific country or company. They have no reason to lie. So that's $40 billion US is what we actually have to come up with on our taxes. And I really think that's a bit of a waste of taxpayers' money when we should be spending that money either to pay down the debt or not spending it at all or spending it on some sort of social program.
Right, for sure. Yeah. Now, when it comes to climate footprint, how's Canada doing?
We are, if you take the top 10 emitters in the world, Canada is in the top 10. And if you rank them according to per person emissions or per capita emissions, we are significantly distant from anybody else. We are number one, the worst.
Wow.
So, but that's great news because we may be the worst, but that means it's the easiest for us to improve and get down to the average of everybody else.
Oh, I see. Yeah, for sure. So let's just say as the individuals, what could people do?
Well, let me defeat your question a little bit.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
The climate is determined by politicians. It's not determined by carbon atoms. It's not determined by companies. It's politicians decide what the temperature will be because they decide how much carbon emissions will be allowed. Okay. And in Canada, individuals like you or me, Nancy, we emit about 15% of Canada's emissions. So if we all stopped driving our cars completely, and we all stopped heating our homes and using electricity at home, that would reduce Canada's emissions by about 15%. We're not that big.
Yes.
So there are some things that as individuals we can do. And I know that's your question. I will get around to it.
That's all right.
But with 85% of our emissions coming from industry, government can put up rules, make a fair playing field across all industry to say, people, we have to reduce fossil fuel emissions. And to get a government to do that, that involves voting. So there's nothing you or I can do that's more important than voting.
Right.
Before you vote, check out what the climate policies are, check out what they say they'll do. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee. There really is not.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
What they say when they're running is not necessarily what they do once they're in power.
Of course, yes.
That's unfortunate.
But you can get some ideas. I mean, some political parties outright deny as part of their platform the existence of climate change. Others seem to take it very seriously.
Right.
And that's the single most important thing you can do. But going back to your real question, what can we do as individuals? There are some things. And the best way to actually reduce your fossil fuel emissions is to save money. Says he, looking straight at the camera, trying to appear sincere. Because in Canada, our emissions come mostly from the fossil fuel industry itself in the process of extracting the fossil fuels. I shouldn't say mostly, but that's the biggest emitter. But then the second biggest is, and third biggest are housing and transportation. So within our transportation, we can easily reduce our carbon footprint. The easiest thing to do would be to switch from a gasoline car to an electric car. That's the one that causes the least disruption to your lifestyle. But other options such as carpooling, taking the bus or train, or even bicycle or walking if you happen to be having a short journey, that's fine too. So it's not what you do that really matters, it's what you don't do that's important. So it doesn't matter how you get from A to B as long as it's not in a vehicle that's emitting carbon dioxide. And there's a bonus to this. I mean, I have an electric car. I drove here today in it, it's parked outside. I could show you a picture of it clean. You won't see that if you look out the window. So be it. But I bought it for $16,000. I could sell it today for $13,000. During that time, it's taken me 80,000 kilometers of journeying around, and the cost in electricity is about 1/7 what the cost of gasoline would be. So the overall cost of buying and operating an electric vehicle, passenger car, is now significantly cheaper than the overall cost of buying a gasoline-powered car. You pay a little bit more up front, but you save so much on gasoline, it makes it up for it. So transportation, that's what you do.
Right.
I can keep going indefinitely, but when you want me to switch questions...
I was just going to say something about the electric vehicles. Like, it seems to me I remember that in Vancouver, they had electric buses, and then they decided to get rid of them.
There's the trolley buses, you mean? They've still got them. With the two overhead pickups as you go down the street with the wires.
No, that's not what I was talking about. I seemed to me they decided they were going to go for the electric city bus. Not the trolleys.
Oh, I didn't actually hear that.
So, well, then maybe I missed.
They might have done a trial and decided it's not quite ready yet. Here's one of the sad things about, well, not sad things about, but one of the things about electric vehicles. There are electric buses, definitely. In China, they care deeply about the climate, despite what our propaganda would lead us to believe. 99% of all electric buses are in China. And the technology with electric buses, say from 10 years ago or 5 years ago, wasn't that great.
Right.
It's amazing what's happened.
Right.
So what you can get today by means of price and performance is way better than what you can get from 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Right.
So they tried it a while ago. They said it doesn't work, but I hope they come back and review that because the technology is so different. For example, my car is from 2015. I can typically get 160 kilometers range out of it. But a similar car from today, now it's about 420 kilometers, at pretty much the same purchase price.
So how many stations are there where you can charge?
Well, in the province overall, hundreds and hundreds. I don't actually know the number.
Okay.
Here in Chilliwack alone, we're going to take a stab at this and say somewhere between 10 and 30.
Oh, okay.
That's a big, wide stab, I know, but I haven't actually ever counted them. So,
Because obviously, like for an apartment building, they have to then... Because they don't have the capability of having that charger post, I guess you would call it, right?
Yeah.
In your underground parking, you know? Because people just park.
Yeah.
So, but if they have an electric vehicle, they can't charge them in their home because they would have to have something installed.
Right. Within apartment buildings, the new building code says build that in.
Oh,
so it's
excellent.
The big problem is the existing apartment buildings and the existing condo buildings.
Right.
But they are being converted. There are grants available to do that.
Yes.
So the average cost of installing a level 2 charger per parking stall, I looked this up just the other day, it's somewhere around $8,000, but you can get a $5,000 rebate from the federal government, which makes up for it. Okay. Also, if I may speak to the condo owners out there, if you're thinking of selling your condo, I think everybody now understands electric cars are the future. If your condo has a level 2 charger, which costs you $3,500 after that rebate, that's going to add a lot more to the value of your property, because the people moving in a few years will be looking for charging. Right. But there are other places to charge too. The Cottonwood Mall, just south of the highway here in Chilliwack, they have 4 chargers, a bank of them. So if you need to do your shopping, plug in, shop, unplug, you've got a charge car.
It's kind of interesting because it makes me think about like in Quebec, the winters are really, really cold, and that they have, if you're parking your vehicle outside, like apartment buildings, they'll all have a plug-in for your
They do,
battery,
the block
you know?
heater. Yeah.
The block heater, yeah. And it made me kind of think of that idea, right? It's just a matter, once they're there, they're there. All right? So anyway, I just want to talk about carbon fuel for a second. Let's just say, or fossil fuels, let's just say person doesn't really understand what that is. So explain to everyone what fossil fuels are.
Okay, sure. A fossil fuel in this context is something that you burn that contains carbon atoms. So that primarily means oil, coal, or natural gas, or their derivatives. So, for example, in your car, you put gasoline that actually is a refined crude oil product. And it contains a string of carbon atoms in the molecule and some hydrogen atoms. When you burn it, what you're doing is combining that with oxygen from the air. So you're basically taking oxygen atoms in the air, combining it with the carbon and the hydrogen atoms. And the hydrogen atoms, when they have oxygen sticking to them, form water vapor or water, eventually when it cools down. And the carbon atoms, when they get oxygen, struggling here, when they get oxygen stuck to them, they become carbon dioxide. And water vapor goes into the air. It traps a little bit of heat, but eventually it rains out because it cools down and poof, it's gone. But the carbon dioxide stays in the air for a long time. Yeah, after about 2,000 years, half of the emissions that we made will still be there.
Wow. Okay.
So it's long, It's similar to the concern that people have about putting radioactive nuclei into the air from nuclear power plants.
Right.
The difference is that when you're using a fossil fuel, you pollute by design, and with a nuclear plant, you pollute by accident. Oh. So there is a difference.
yeah, a scary difference. I'm just thinking about when you go out and you're giving your talks on it. What kind of response are you getting?
It's changed over the years. About 15 years ago, I had a friend who set me up with a whole bunch of Rotary clubs in Chilliwack and Abbotsford. And it was really interesting to go there because a lot of people would look at me a little bit sideways as if they weren't quite sure that they believed it. Right. And there'd been a massive misinformation campaign going on for many years, decades in fact. And various groups, you sort of get caught up within the group that you're in. If the group that you're in doesn't believe in the science of climate change, then you won't believe it. It's really amazing how that works. I used to go into Rotary clubs and get people that would put their arms like this, great big hairy bare arms, and they say, well, I think this is bullshit. Am I allowed to say that on television?
It's too late now.
Oh, you got out there, okay.
I don't bleep anybody.
That was an exact quote, so I think I'm okay. Not my word. Now I get a much more friendly reception when I go.
Good,
so I think people are starting to realise that there's been enough exposure to the news, but most importantly, we didn't used to have fires in British Columbia. Now we have fires. I mean, there was the occasional fire, but now it's becoming closer every summer. Here in the valley, we smoke up almost every summer now. We had the heat dome. We lost Lytton. Hopefully it'll be rebuilt. But people were talking for a while, trying to distract from what happened. They said, oh, we've got to find the source of the ignition. Well, it doesn't matter. When you have the climate that dries things out so much, it's going to catch fire. It's almost irrelevant what the source of ignition is.
Right.
The problem was caused by us emitting all those fossil fuels.
Of course. Of course. We can't get away from the fact that we are the reason.
That's right.
So, it kind of amazes me how people will see what they see, but kind of put their blinders on anyway, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's those are the people that you need to get through to. Well, actually, the politicians are... Like, use your vote, as you said, use your vote to vote for whoever is pushing for climate change and hopefully following through. And if they don't follow through, you just make sure you don't vote for them next go round.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Well, that's the best you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, have we touched on everything?
No, you did. Going back to your original question.
All right,
it's taken a while, isn't it? I'm having fun. The other thing that contributes quite a lot at the individual level to our carbon dioxide emissions is heating your home. Okay. And there's been, again, a massive change in technology. So you can heat your home using natural gas, and that's what most people probably still do here in Chilliwack, or you can heat it using a heat pump. The heat pump technology has changed dramatically. It used to be something that would spin around outside making a whirring sound, and if it wasn't too cold, it would give you enough heat to get by. But now heat pumps work all the way down to minus 25. There's even one that claims it works down to minus 30 Celsius.
Right.
and you can just use it all the time. You don't need gas attached to your house. In fact, several cities in the United States have now outlawed connecting a gas supply to new construction, which I'd love to see that happen here.
Yeah.
So,
When I lived in Ontario, we had a heat pump, and it was interchangeable. Because if the gas prices were high, we would use electricity. So that's what was happening, right? So it's kind of interesting. And in our building here, we all have baseboard heats. We do have a fireplace, gas fireplace. We're encouraged not to use them for heating the place, right? So, and most people, I think, follow that rule because, it doesn't usually heat your whole house. But I like the baseboards in that I only have to heat whatever room I want to heat.
that's right, yeah. So,
Although I have learned something. This is the thing. If you have doors open, let's just say you turn your heat on, baseboard heating on in your living room, and your bedroom is close. Your bedroom door is open. It forces your heat to work harder. So it's best to close that bedroom door. Right? So that's a trick I learned from an electrician, actually.
There you go, yeah.
So how's
It
that?
really works, yeah.
Okay, so now what else is you want to bring up?
Oh, those are the two big ones as to what people can do. If you happen to be not talking about your own house, but a building manager, you're doing renovations, think carefully about the energy signature of your property. Because even though you may say, well, we shouldn't spend money just to reduce carbon dioxide emissions because we're supposed to give the tenants the best deal, I think what's happening is if you put a lot of, for example, gas heating in, carbon taxes will go up. They have to. Because if they don't, there's no future, in which case you don't plan for that. But assuming they go up, if you put too much money into your gas infrastructure, when the carbon tax goes up, you're going to be paying a fortune and your tenants will not be thanking you. So plan ahead. Plan for much higher carbon prices. Plan for much more strict regulations. The good news is there are a lot of provincial and federal programs available. It takes a while to figure out what they are and how they fit together, but they exist. If you're owning your own property, like a standalone house, I'm one of the few fortunate ones in Chilliwack that does. I've got an inspector coming around week after next. He's going to spend 2 hours going through the property and make a whole bunch of recommendations as to what changes to make, and I can pay for the changes and I can get a large refund from the federal government and also from the provincial government. So those programs are out there. It doesn't have to cost us a lot to reduce our energy footprint. And from that point on, I'm going to be paying much less for heating.
Very nice.
That's also good,
Very
yeah.
nice. I just want to switch the topic for just a second. Like of all the countries, which one would you say, or do you know of, that is doing the best when it comes to reducing?
Britain actually is way up there. They're doing a fantastic job. Over the last 20 years, Canada has increased our emissions by about 20%. Britain has reduced theirs by something like 40%. And they were a factor of 3 below us to begin with. So it's really amazing. You can do that, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Generally speaking, it doesn't make sense to look at a country's emissions because it's really unfair to compare Denmark to China, where you've got so many more people. That's really unfair to expect China to get down as far as Denmark. So we talk about the per person or the per capita amounts. Canada is running at about 3 times the world average. Europe is running at the world average. China is running about 2.5 less than us, so it's a shade above the world average. But again, the vast majority of countries are well below that, of course. So in terms of what's our model imperative here in Canada, the way I look at it is there's a certain amount of room left in the atmosphere. There's a certain amount of carbon dioxide can be emitted before it's a disaster for everybody. And how should that be divided by the world's citizens? And the only thing I can think that really makes sense is to say everybody should have the same amount of room. So that would mean Canada would have to bring itself in line with the rest of the world. So we need to have a factor. The science has said we need a factor of 2 reduction compared to 2018 by the year 2030. So in that time, those 12 years, we would need to reduce by a factor of 3 to get down to the world average, and then along with the rest of the world, reduce by a factor of 2. So we need to reduce by a factor of 6. Believe it or not, that's doable. The longer we leave it, the more bumpy the transition is, to say the least, because you have to start throwing away perfectly good vehicles and perfectly good buildings. So the sooner you get going on it, the easier it's going to be.
Why do you think Canada has been so slow to do? I mean, I understand the politicians, but then are there not the lobbyists? Is that the issue, do you think?
And lobbyists is probably a large part of it, yeah. If fossil fuels are the problem, and if the future is clean energy, we spend far more taxpayers' dollars giving it to the fossil fuel industry than we do to the clean energy industry.
Right.
It's bizarre. The clean energy in Canada actually employs far more people than the fossil fuel industry. If we got rid of all fossil fuels overnight, and that would be very uncomfortable, to say the least, but only 2% of the population would be directly losing their jobs. So there's not that much.
And that's an issue here coming up all the time. This is our job, right? So, people latch onto that, and it has a big impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. The people who like to manufacture and distribute opiates, which are killing people, not as much as fossil fuels, but they still do kill people, they can say the same argument.
Of course, absolutely.
And I see no difference. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Well, I think we're just about out of time.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want to get in contact with Tim Cooper to give a talk about what he's saying here today, and he can go on longer, because usually when you go give these talks, it's an hour and a half, whatever.
I can be a complete windbag, yeah, but I can do 3 minutes and I can do 3 hours. So you just let me know, or we can just sit around and drink tea and chat. I'm happy to do that too.
Right. Now you're on Facebook, and they can contact you on Facebook, right?
Yeah, email's probably the easiest.
Okay.
I'm now a professor emeritus at the university, so I can keep my email.
Okay.
So tim.cooper@ufv.ca. You can always contact me that way.
I'll make sure it's included,
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you everybody for watching, and I hope you keep doing so, and pay attention to what we're saying, because this affects everybody on this planet, and we only have one planet, as far as I know, to live on, even though they're trying to explore, but who knows what will happen there. Anyway, take care, everybody, and peace out.
I know.
It's not turning on.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see.